The fate of the 21-year-old seaman recruit accused of setting fire to the USS Bonhomme Richard is in the hands of a military judge tonight. Closing arguments wrapped up at Naval Base San Diego today in the trial of Ryan Mays. If he is found guilty, he could face a life sentence. Joining me tonight is attorney Gary Barthel, founder of the Military Law Center, who represented Seaman Mays previously, here to share some perspective on the case. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you, Carla.
You know, first thing people wonder about smoking guns, that kind of thing in a trial. Was there anything that came out of these 2 weeks that surprised you? There's
nothing new that came out during the past 2 weeks that we didn't already know at the time that we did the Article 32, the preliminary hearing.
You know, for our viewers who don't understand how it works, Seaman Mays, you told me this before, he had the choice of a jury of his peers or a judge. You thought he should choose a judge. He did do that. Did that feel like the right choice as you watched this play out?
I think that was the right choice because the convening authority who ordered the court-martial would also be the same individual who picks the jury members for that court-martial. Given the nature of this case, there could be a lot of emotion with members. Whereas with a military judge, he's going to look at the facts, he's going to look at the evidence, he's going to weigh it, he's not going to be swayed by any kind of emotion. He's got experience looking at these sorts of cases and the type of evidence that's been presented.
The prosecution's case largely centered on testimony from one person, and that testimony had changed over the course of time. How did that play out in court? How did that witness present themselves, and do you think came across as credible?
Well, Velasco didn't change his testimony at trial.
Right.
But on the day of the fire, he didn't report seeing anybody go down to the lower V, which you think somebody who's standing duty would. And then he eventually, when he was questioned by NCIS in July, he first told them he didn't recognize the individual he saw. At the end of that first interview, NCIS coaxed him and said, well, is there any speculation, anybody you could speculate might be? And that's when he mentioned, well, it could be Mays, but he only identified Mays after previously meeting with some other sailors who suggested, hey, that could have been Mays.
And how did that play out on the stand? How did that play out in his testimony?
Well, he testified to that. He also testified that he felt pressured by NCIS. He also testified that other people were questioning him and thought that he might have been the person who started the fire. He was sending texts to friends of his saying, hey, you don't think I really did it, do you? And so when NCIS interrogated him, they took his DNA swab, they searched his vehicles, they searched his devices, and so he felt like he was a suspect. So he did feel a lot of pressure.
So for their biggest piece of evidence, do you think this was a strong case or a strong piece of evidence for the prosecution?
Velasco is the strongest evidence that the government has in this case, and I think during the trial his credibility was impeached given the various statements that he provided, and so you know, it's what the government has.
What did the prosecution write? What should Seaman Mays be worried about right now?
Well, right now it's in the hands of the judge, so Seaman Mays is still concerned. You know, it's not over till it's over, and so he's still very concerned about how this is going to play out. But I think the defense did a very good job of playing out the evidence that they have. The government's case is circumstantial. That's how they argued it. They argued to the judge that he should use his common sense and the reasonable ways of the world in evaluating the circumstantial evidence. The defense, on the other hand, in their closing, presented actual evidence. You know, testimony from witnesses who saw Mays in a different uniform than what Velasco said he was wearing. And so there was definitely, the defense focused on actual evidence that countered the theories that the government was putting out.
So we're all on verdict watch. We'll see what happens next.
We're all on verdict watch.
Gary Barthel with the Military Law Center, founder of the Military Law Center. Thank you again for your time. I look forward to talking to you again after we hear that verdict.
Thank you, Carlo.